Hey, all, today we're going to put together some ideas that we've worked on recently. One of them is doing operations with polynomials, and the other one is factoring trinomials. So, in these examples, we have trinomials, and we are trying to multiply them by binomials. So, a three term polynomial divided by a two-term polynomial. We have divided by monomials, that means one term. But when we divide by two terms, it's slightly different and we need to be more careful. So, what we're going to do is first change any letters that are not x to x so that we can graph them. As you can see uh, in my Desmos, I already have set up that I'm going to graph this using x instead of n. And I want to write this as a fraction so that it looks like division, like we're used to seeing it. And I don't want to write n. And so now what we're going to do in order to divide x squared plus 8x minus 9 by x minus 1 is we are going to factor, like we did in the previous lesson, x squared plus 8x minus 9. And so we're going to graph this thing and find its x-intercepts. We had the strategy of finding the x-intercepts, then writing out what the solutions were. So in this case, x equals -9 and x equals 1. And then we were able to convert those solutions to factors. And so you should use that method if the factoring thing is still a little tricky for you and you're still really working on it, then you should do that. But one thing, alternate method we could do is know that we're going to have two parentheses. We're going to know that in each parentheses, they're going to start with the letter x. And then they're going to have a number that comes after it that's either added or subtracted. And if you've done enough of the factoring problems, you would have noticed that whatever our x-intercept is, that sign is going to change. So x equals -9 would become x plus 9, and that would be one of our factors. And this x equals +1, when we move that +1, the way we did it when we factored, it becomes -1. If that is too much of a shortcut for you, then make sure that you're using the old method where we wrote down the x-intercepts. And then we wrote down the solutions, x equals -9, x equals 1. And then we moved those numbers over to be with x. And then we were able to take those and use them as our factors. So what I did was a bit of a shortcut. The more that you have practiced the factoring, trinomials, the more quickly you'll be able to see what they'll be without doing those steps. But if you need those steps so you don't make a mistake, please use them. So you can see we have x minus 1 on top of our fraction, and we also have x minus 1 on the bottom of our fraction. Since those parentheses mean that we're multiplying those two things, we can cancel out any of the things being multiplied if they exist on the bottom of the fraction. So we can actually cancel out x minus 1 and x minus 1 like we did when we worked with exponents or we were dividing polynomials earlier. And so what's left over is just x plus 9. And that is our final answer. So x squared plus 8x minus 9 divided by x minus 1 equals x plus 9. And so anytime, remember, we don't have x as our letter, we are going to change our letter to x. And then we're going to factor our top of our fraction. So that x squared minus 11x plus 28. Put that in the Desmos, find the x-intercepts. So 4070. Again, if factoring is tricky for you, please use the steps that we talked about when we went over factoring. If you're comfortable with it and you can see that my factors are going to both have an x at the beginning, and then those x values from our x-intercepts, +4 and +7, if we were to unsolve our solutions, it's going to become -4 and -7. Again, if you can't see that right away, just by looking at the x-intercepts, please do the step-by-step process. So our factors are x -4, x -7 on top. You can see on the top and the bottom, we have x -7. That can be canceled. And so we are left with a final answer here of x -4. And that's how we divide trinomials by binomials. We have to factor the top of the fraction, which we call the numerator. Of course, you'll remember that when we were factoring earlier, we don't always get these nice, neat x-intercepts, and so we have to change them to fractions, and then that makes the factors a little bit different. So if we look at number 13, and we rewrite r for x so that we can communicate properly with Desmos, we can see we have one funky intercept that has a decimal in it and then one that doesn't. We're still going to have the two parentheses on top. And x -1 on the bottom. This intercept here with a regular number, 1, we can write the factor pretty easily. Again, if you need to do the steps, do the steps. I've said that a few times, and I mean it. If you recognize that that factor is going to be x -1, then that's great too. Whichever way you are most comfortable with. And we would have converted -4.5 to a decimal. So let's do that. -9/2. And so this is where we would have x equals -9/2. And when we're unsolving it, the denominator goes in front of the letter x, and then we would move over the -9 to become +9. And so we could get our other factor, 2x + 9. Again, if you can see that without doing the work, then I can encourage you to do that. So the bottom number of our fraction, this 2, is going to be the number that goes in front of x. And then what's left over, -9, when it gets moved over, it changes its sign and becomes +9, just like I showed you. And then much like our previous examples, we can cancel the x -1s. And we can get a final answer of 2x + 9 as the solution to our division problem. And we're going to do one more together, number 14. And again, I'm going to set this up because I know there's going to be two parentheses on top. I'll go look at my intercept. So I have one intercept that's nice. -7 is nice and easy. That's going to change to +7. So x + 7 is on top. Then we have this decimal, 0.167. Anytime I see a decimal with a 6-7, that's because we rounded a 6, and that's because there were a lot of 6s. And so we get that to be 1/6. So like we did in the last one, the denominator, that 6 that's on the bottom of the fraction, that's the number that's going to go in front of x. And so we'd have positive 1 left over. And to put it into our factor, we change it to -1. I'll say it one more time. If you need to use the steps that we discussed when we factored, then you absolutely should do that. There's nothing wrong with that. It will only take you an extra 30 seconds or so. And if that helps you get it right, it helps you organize your thoughts, then you should definitely do that. So we have an x plus 7 on top and an x plus 7 on the bottom. We're going to go ahead and cross those out. They cancel. And I'm left with 6x minus 1 as my final answer to what happens when I divide these two polynomials. So that's it for what we need to do here. Ask questions if you got stuck on any of these before you move on to the practice. And once you get your questions answered, you feel comfortable going forward, you should do at least 3 more on each page. So that means you'll do 6 problems right now, 3 on each page. Make sure you check your answers and make sure you ask for help if you need it. Take your time and good luck.